Where did summer go?
Yeah, go on.
Zip, zip, it's gone.
Is your pool still full?
Yeah, but it's not anywhere I want to go right now. It's coming down this weekend. It's bad when you see steam coming off the pool in the morning and you go, I don't think so.
You don't have it closed yet, Wayne?
No,
Whoa.
we had a little swimming party Sunday, so or Saturday, we got it in. But that's it. You got yours closed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This weekend.
Today was plumbing day.
New water heater at the buildings?
Oh, I got that 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I'm using Moss. They do a nice job.
Yeah, Ronnie's a good guy.
Mhm.
Yeah, so no, we had a sewer line that had to be cleaned out.
Always something.
Water should go down, not up.
Yeah.
Gurgling is not a good sound. I thought for a moment I was back in Medina.
Oh, God.
Where's this place at, Andy, on Lake Street? Is it in your?
Right behind me. He's in the building just just north of me, Wayne.
Oh, okay.
There's
Okay.
4 buildings back there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's right behind me. He's outgrown it. He's looking to move.
I hope he stays in Roselle.
Yeah, he's gonna stay in Roselle. He's moving to Monaco, is what he's trying to put together.
We got a lot in common. We came from the same area, the Chicago area.
You know, like I said, Ronnie's a good kid.
No, and he's fair too. That's what I like. They do a really good job. They do a really professional job and they're fair with their pricing.
Mhm.
That Jason, he can hold a smile for a long time, can't he?
I guess I have to unmute to say good evening, Lee.
Good evening.
5:30, Mayor.
You're on mute.
All right, let's stand for the pledge of allegiance, call the meeting to order. Everybody would join me. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of
of
the United
the
States
United States of America,
And to the
republic which it stands,
republic,
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
liberty,
liberty, and
justice for all.
for all.
Madam Clerk, if I can have a roll call, please.
Mayor Maglio,
I am here.
trustee Berkshire,
Here.
trustee Babbitt, absent. Trustee Domke,
Here,
trustee Pulaski,
Here.
trustee Sarno. Here. And trustee Trejo.
Here,
You have a quorum.
All righty, then. Can I have a motion to accept this evening's presentation of
so
the agenda?
made, so made.
second,
All right, Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Domke,
Yes, aye.
trustee Trejo,
aye,
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Sarno. Aye. And trustee Pulaski.
Aye. Okay, and the agenda is accepted. Okay. We'll move right into the public comments for this evening. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the village board will be meeting virtually as we are and will be streamlined on our live village YouTube. Madam Clerk, did we have any comments?
Yes, we do. We have two comments tonight to read at the board meeting. The first is from Fred Leonard. He asked to please replace the street sign at 320 Pinecroft Drive, Roselle. He attached a video to his email to show what happened to the sign. He also asked to help him understand why the no parking this side of the street was discontinued. And he'd like to be notified when the board expects to review installing curbs on Roselle streets. Our second public comment is from Kathleen Rickert. And she says, good evening. I would like to address the shutdown of Roselle Cruise Night at the American Legion. This is an outdoor event that is loved by many in this community and more from neighboring communities. Masks should not have been an issue here. There is obviously an underlying cause to this shutdown. If this is solely based on COVID, then why was Pollyanna allowed to hold an Oktoberfest? If it is true that the mayor and or village want the American Legion's property to build living spaces, I would be disgusted and embarrassed to be a part of this community. Luxury apartments were constructed on Irving Park and are still not fully or near half rented out. This type of development would be unnecessary. And finally, to threaten the American Legion is the most un-American thing to do. This place helps our veterans. Thank you for listening, and I hope that things will be thought out more carefully in the future. I look forward to your responses to my thoughts. And that's all.
That's all we have this evening. Okay. Jeff, can I ask you if you would, or yeah, there you go. If you would address the Mr. Leonard's problem there, or not problem, I'm saying his comments.
Yep, I've already talked with Karen Young, our Director of Public Works, who's going to meet with our police chief about the sign replacement, looking at the village code on the parking restrictions. And then with the curbs, Mr. Leonard, we pretty much do it and we look at it as construction occurs. So we'll be getting back to you both on the sign that's in place and the parking restrictions.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And then, if everybody doesn't mind, I would like to address the cruise night thing. I mean, it's been very, very, very rough. Pros and cons on cruise night. It puts us in a no-win situation. It saddens me when the amount of complaints come in that an outside agency from the county has to step in to enforce the guidelines that are in place for these types of things. I mean, I know most of the residents don't know there are different guidelines for different events. I mean, I've had a lot of dialogue between car show people, the residents, some that want to, some that don't. So it really is a no-win situation for the village. The village was, sadly to say, not the ones that stipulated them not doing or doing what they had to do by canceling the car show. I've gotten comments, how does the village allow a protest, which we have no control of? How do we allow the car show from other people when they can't go to church? Their children can't have graduations. We canceled the Rose Parade. We canceled the 4th of July, which are all outside aspects. We canceled the Taste of Roselle. That's the other side of the coin. So like I said, it saddens me dearly that we get put in this type of situation because it is definitely a no-win situation. You know what? The only thing I can say to everybody is I hope everybody can be well, stay healthy, so they can enjoy all these things next year. And like I say, it wasn't the village that put the final say on it. We found out, and we did try to work with the American Legion to tell them what the conditions should be and what they had to follow. It was the complaints that went directly to the other department that final action was taken. So that's my comments on that.
Mr. Mayor, with that other group, was that something from the county then directly that came out?
It was yes, it was directed to the organizer of the car show and to the American Legion. That was the health department.
But the health department came?
Sent notice, yes.
Okay, thank you.
We have to follow legislation. We're not a home rule community, so we do have to follow that legislation from, both state and county. So, I mean, it's like I said, I know we take the end of the conversation from the people that are for and against. So it's a no-win situation for this village board, and it's sad to say you can't have winners in every race. 2. Okay. And then if that is all we have on comments.
Really quick, Mr. Mayor, we have someone on the chat asked about, could you address why Pollyanna was allowed an event?
There's different, there are different not rules, there are different requirements for the events and how that they're run. Chief, if you can help me out on that one, I don't know them verbatim, but I know there's different qualifications for restaurants, different qualifications for gatherings. Am I correct?
That's correct. Gatherings are 50 people, masked. There is no social distancing. When it comes to bars, restaurants, there's different requirements, different regulations, and those are on the governor's orders. And like the mayor said, really what we were doing is we're just passing along the information that we had. Pollyanna, we have done inspections at Pollyanna. We've done inspections at Sammy's. We've done inspections at Rookies. We've gone to all of the facilities, anywhere we've gotten complaints or anywhere there's gatherings, to make sure that they are complying with what we see as far as the governor's order is. None of the businesses that we had stopped in had any violations.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, if I understood your comments, the health department came in, they made recommendations, they made suggestions, of which were passed on to the American Legion, and they could have abided by those and then perhaps could have continued. Is that a fair assessment?
The letter that was sent, I was copied on. I made sure that the Legion had it. The decision, whatever decision was made by the Legion. But yeah, there were, you're correct. There are restrictions that were in place that could have been followed, that were listed in the letter. That letter is posted at the Legion Hall, and they made that decision.
Can I ask a question, Andy?
Sure, Wayne, go ahead, please.
So I think what people are really kind of upset or don't understand is why can't it be in writing somewhere like, how many you're allowed outdoors, how many you're allowed indoors? Are they a total population of both indoor and outdoor? Things like that. I've looked on the county website and I can't understand. It says 50 or less, but like in Chicago, I think it's 50 or less or inside, and then 25 to 50% of the area. And then outside, I think Chicago allows 200. So I was looking for different numbers from DuPage County and I don't see anything. So it's kind of ambiguous for everyone to understand the rules. And that's why I think people get surprised.
Well,
Does
if I
anybody
may
have
add
the
some,
rules?
the city of Chicago is a different set of rules than what we have, probably.
What rules do we have?
We-
Where are they?
Ours are governed by the state of Illinois, by the governor, by the health department, the state health department. That's who determines the rules. That's who publishes them, and that's how we get them.
Could somebody in the village make a page just for Roselle based on the county or state requirements so we all know what the restrictions are?
Jeff,
On our website, we have a COVID section of our website that links to the state of Illinois, the guidelines for all that the chief and Andy have mentioned. So
But
it's-
they're unclear, Jeff. They're unclear on this.
But then my suggestion is we stick with the link, because it is not our job to interpret or to contradict them, that we should simply pass
But
along the
you're
information.
But you're enforcing it, so you should be able to tell the people what they shouldn't do.
We're
before
enforcing based on the link. We're based on the rules that are out there. So as much as I would like to continue and debate this, that is the link, that is the official. And if it gets changed between now and the time we put something out there, we're at fault. So we need to stick with that. And
And you
simply
could
read
date it, you could say, as of right now, this is the way it can be for Roselle. Right? It surprises people when you come down and you know all about it, but you don't know all about it for the people before they do something. So this is what I don't.
I would defer to Jim, because I think legally we can get ourselves in a world of hurt just simply by the fact that if we date something, we have it and it's outdated by the governor, and then we're the ones that have to constantly maintain that. But that's my thinking of it.
And we have to follow the Illinois Department of Public Health's guidelines, and those are actually implemented and put into what I'd characterize as enforcement form by the county health department. If there's ambiguities in it, it's because there are ambiguities. Trying to draw out the conclusions as to what those mean, I think, Bruce, as you've indicated, is very, very difficult, because we're not the agency that promulgates the regulations. And as a consequence, what the regulations mean then is determined if there are enforcement actions that are brought against the people and they question the legality of the enforcement actions. So that has occurred, and there have been places where there has been that type of litigation, but there's nothing in the appellate that provides any direct guidance, at least in DuPage County. So it's a very, very difficult thing. And Wayne, I understand your frustration with
I'm
it.
not frustrated. The residents are frustrated. That same cruise night show went on Wednesday over to Wooddale and they had the event. So it looks like Roselle, is being more of a stickler for detail than anybody else.
okay, Wayne, can I just interrupt here for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you implied that we enforce this, okay? I'm going to tell you that there was many of dialogues with the chief, myself, and the American Legion to tell them what we were being told by the health department before action was taken, okay? And then it was not action done by our enforcement. The letter and everything came directly from the county and the health department. So, I mean, we tried to work with everybody. We tried to get them to do stuff. I mean, people, I've got several people, they tell me their children can't even have a wedding because dancing is not allowed because of the pandemic, because of the social distancing. And it was on, I mean, they have it on, it was on their Facebook page and everybody, and videos. We didn't have to stop there to look at this. It was just one of those things that, like I said, the amount of complaints that the health department itself received from our other residents is what put this into action.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may just emphasize two words, which you and the chief said, we reviewed that with them, and it was their decision not to abide by what the health department was
They could have
recommending.
carried it on if they would have abided by what was put in place, so.
Well, I'm gonna look really hard to see what the state requires, and I'm gonna try to give us a synopsis of what it is.
You know,
And see if it's a better way of defining it.
well,
I
nice.
don't know. What about trick or treat? Is it gonna be the same situation? I think Patrick brought that up a couple of meetings ago.
Jeff, do you have more information on Halloween?
Sure. As of right now, I shared with the board that the CDC has come up with some guidelines for trick or treating and other holidays during the fall. As of right now, the Illinois Department of Public Health or DuPage County or the state have not come up with any guidance, recommendations for trick or treating. We are seeing a number of communities and our neighbors with different options for trick or treating, encouraging people to follow the CDC guidelines, perhaps putting placards on their front door which says they want to participate, they don't want to participate. I sat in on a DuPage County Health Department meeting this morning. They are expecting guidelines that will probably be similar of CDC coming from the Illinois Department of Health and the governor's office soon.
Hopefully they
Mr.
do
Mayor,
that before Halloween.
Anybody else?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor, you have another question in the chat from C. Ritchie that is asking you to address one more comment from the email, the coincidence that the American Legion was disciplined and interest in their property to rebuild residential buildings.
Okay, you kind of cut out on me, Patty. I heard about the property, interest in the property.
Correct.
The village, to my knowledge, we're not buying any property. There was at one time, I believe, a year and a half ago, a developer that did approach the American Legion on an idea, and to all of my knowledge, that was not carried through, and it hasn't moved forward or progressed in any matter.
Mr. Mayor, the other piece of that comment was a inferral that the coincidence of the discipline had something to do with that, which I think we've laid that out quite clearly in all this conversation.
Yeah,
That it was not the case.
I think it was a written letter that the American Legion did get. I don't think there was a fine or anything that accompanied that. It was a request to the Legion to follow the ordinance.
But
Does that answer it all, Patty?
There's no violation.
There was no violation. Okay. All right, anybody else? Then let's move on to the official.
Comment?
I'm sorry?
I apologize, sir. Time for one more comment.
Absolutely, Fred.
Thank you, sir. This is Fred Leonard. I called in and actually sent an email a number of weeks ago about dogs crapping on my lawn. Trivial things compared to some of the others, but I wanted to thank the team for what I think is a genuine response. It didn't resolve things, but it was a genuine response from this board meeting. I was visited actually that evening by a community officer, and just the fact that he was here stopped my next door neighbor from walking over here to use my lawn as opposed to hers. I've had a number of discussions, I guess, with folks about their dogs and my yard and things like that. And I'm thinking that there's an education issue as well. So I might be being a little particular, if you will, about requesting folks to keep their dogs off the lawn, but once they're on their lawn, they do their business, they attract everybody else. So we've ended up with a situation where okay, folks are going across the street or they're using the parkway or something like that, so be it. When the folks get the license, and I don't know, I'm just sort of chatting about this. I'm thinking that there should be an acknowledgement of the city codes. It's 1342 A, B, C, and D. And there should probably be a notice in the Roselle paper for definitely spring and summer that these are the expected behaviors for folks with dogs. That's all I had, folks.
I know we try to get that in our newsletters on many occasions, so we will continue to do that, and hopefully people will pay attention. Fred, I feel your pain. I live on a corner lot that's right through the park and the walkway, so I understand fully. Okay.
And again, I want to thank you. So the email I sent in today regarding the sign itself, it's got a video. So what I've done.
I did see the
so
video.
yeah, I can. So I can point out exactly what's going on, and now there's at least evidence to help people understand. We'll phrase it that way.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
Let's move on to our official and staff report. And first, I'd like to have a motion to conduct a public hearing on the text amendment for zoning ordinance establishing short-term rentals as permitted residence use subject to conditions.
So moved.
And a second, please.
I'll second.
And I have a roll call, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir. Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Valeski.
Aye.
Okay, notice has been served for the public meeting. It has been posted in the Daily Herald in the September 11th, 2020 edition, and there is a notice on file with our village clerk. Okay, at this time I would ask for comments from the public, if there are any comments pertaining to our ordinance change. Please let the record show none. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak in favor of this petition? Please let our record show none. Is there anyone who would like to speak against this petition? Please let our record show none. Any questions or comments from the board?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, you should be asking for questions from the public during the public presentation portion of the hearing. Thank you.
Sorry, any questions from the public? Okay, let our record show none. Questions or comments from the board? Mr. Domke, you had your hand up there first.
Yeah, I just have a couple to ask. Number one, where does it say that short-term rental agreement can be terminated? I only saw where it could only be given in every 12-month increments, but is there any cause that will terminate their license?
We've left that between the landlord or the host, as it's defined in the ordinance,
Right.
and the tenant. The other thing that limits it, Wayne, is the number of days. A minimum of 3, a maximum of 30.
Yeah.
Those impose an ordinance restriction on it, but I've not seen any ordinances from any other communities where they've actually specified the details of the contract in terms of what the host and what the tenant can agree to as part of their contract. So that's why you do not see that in the ordinance itself. If you start to go into that kind of detail, how much detail do you go into? What we're trying to do here under the ordinances, we're trying to make certain that the problems that arise in the context of short-term rentals can be handled in a rational way. Do you have overcharges if they use too much water? Just an example to show how much detail you could get into. The owner and or the host and the tenant, I think, should have the ability in their own contract, which they can write to place those kinds of additional detailed limitations on it. If there's a violation, of the code at that point, that would be an obvious justification to terminate it.
So that would stop multiple offenses at a single house from continuous. Let's say you have just one bad actor that's a host.
Mhm.
How would you deal with that? over
You'd
and
issue
over again?
citations under the ordinance. And the current fine structure of the ordinance, Wayne, purports to increase the fines to double the ordinary fines that you would have for an ordinary ordinance violation.
Just financially, we can stop them.
Yeah, yeah. As I indicated the last time we met, that this ordinance is not deterrence or enforcement in the middle. It is deterrence in the front and enforcement at the end.
And if
And
I
that's
could,
because the resources you would have to put in to do otherwise would be very substantial, both in terms of manpower or person power, I guess is a better way to put it, and the amount of research you'd have to do to accomplish those types of controls.
okay, so not a lot of teeth, but okay, let me go to the second one and then I'll give up the floor. I thought we were going to include a notification to neighbors in the local area when a short-term rental is proposed. Is that taken off of the board? Are we not going to do that?
We are going to do that, Wayne. We will handle that through the zoning administrator.
But I didn't see it in our packet at all. I just fear that when you don't see something, it's going to be forgotten or dropped.
That can very easily be inserted into the ordinance, Wayne, when the next draft appears before the village board for a vote.
I would say.
The other board members would like to do that. We can definitely do that. It's not problematic.
Okay, okay.
Just to follow up on that, I would like to do that. Or at least have some access to information on the village site that someone could look and see, like a GIS or something, like where the short-term rentals are in the village.
We can add that to the ordinance if no one objects.
Well,
Anybody
the one
object?
thing,
David?
yeah. I'm sorry.
So I like the spirit of it. I 100% agree we should be notifying neighbors. I just don't think it belongs in the ordinance the way that ordinances are supposed to be written and carried out. Like, that's an internal policy. I completely agree with you, Wayne. I don't want this to get lost in the weeds, but I have faith that our zoning administrator can make note of that and follow up on it. And I agree with Lee, like, we should have this on the website. I just don't think the more we clutter our ordinances with stuff like that, the more difficult they become to navigate, kind of like how you were talking about the state laws regulations. I think as simple as we can make this, the better it's going to be for residents and us overall. But I agree, just not in the ordinance.
Well, if I could just add that
Bruce?
one thing, Andy, if I could just add one thing to what David said. I'm not looking to do something that's not legal or appropriate, but don't forget, we need to protect the residents every bit as much as we need to protect the host. And if something's going on next door to you, and there's a lot of people that don't live in your neighborhood, you may not want your son or your daughter to go walking down the street that night. So I'm just saying what we can put into the ordinance to protect the residents. Don't forget, the residents are the ones that are paying our bills.
Bruce?
So where do I begin? I agree with David that that is an administrative duty. It's not something that should be part of the ordinance. When we put it in there for discussion, it was just for an awareness that we should be notifying. And that was part of the discussion that the committee had put together. So again, it's an administrative task that should be handled and notified. And if anything, then Jeff and Jason should be ensuring that that work gets done as part of their oversight. And then lastly, if I understood Lee correctly about putting something on our website, I'm for putting the ordinance on our website, but I am not for putting a list of homes that are in this short-term rental. It is not our job to maintain, nor shall we have to. We will be spending more man and person power to do so. That is, if you want to go look on it, go on Airbnb.
And I'm sorry, guys. I thought we had some discussion on this the last time we talked about this, and this was going to be done. Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, or Jason. Didn't we have discussion on this, that this was going to be done at the time of the application or something, where the immediate neighbors would be notified?
Yes, so we, I believe how we had discussed it was we would sort of go through it like a business license gets approved. So I would do the review of the application. I would send out the notification. We'd have a sort of form letter that we would send out to neighbors on either side and behind, is what we had discussed in the committee meeting. And that would just be part of the application process.
I thought I had recollection of us discussing that, and it was brought up at the last meeting also. Patrick, did you have something to add, please?
Yeah, this goes along with that. So yes, during our discussion, it was notifying the immediate neighbors. It's not publicizing it on the website for all residents. I'm totally against that. I don't think that that's a necessary step.
All right. Yes, Wayne.
There's a couple other questions I have, just so I know what this all means. Who is the zoning administrator? Is that Karen?
That's Karen.
Currently, that's Karen.
Okay. Page 2, Jim, you've got an or where the owners pay all the property taxes. When you have or, should you say or and? Because it almost looks like if they pay the property taxes, or they don't have to pay the property taxes. It almost is a little ambiguous on page 2. And then on page 4, why, Jim, why is the license exclusive of the driver's license number, which may be redacted? What is the
Because
legal-
under state law, Wayne, that is private information.
I see. Okay, I wanted to hear
Freedom of
that.
Information Act, that's something that can be redacted by a municipality if somebody files an FOI request. So that's protected under the law. And that's because driver's license identifications can be used in identity theft schemes. So that's the reason the state adopted those statutes for that purpose. As to the first question, whether it should be and or, the answer was no. And the reason the answer was no is you can have an owner, not a registered voter, but who pays the taxes. And those are both indicia of ownership.
I see.
When you register to vote, you have to register your actual residence of vote. If you're paying the taxes and you're not a registered voter, you still own that property. So in most cases, there'll be some places where you might have somebody who's paying taxes on a house, for their children or something like that, and they're not there. But the most important thing is that the people in control of the property are acting as the hosts. And that's what we're trying to work at and try to get the best overall result.
One last question, if I may, with Jim, Steve, and what necessitated on page 5, and maybe the committee, Bruce and then Patrick, more than one squad car, or it's got to be 2 squad cars would enact, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking at my page here.
That's
Well, you use 2 squad cars instead of 1 to make a decision on whether they were not in compliance. I guess that's what it is. You know what I'm talking? Anybody know what I'm talking?
Yeah,
about?
we're trying to define extraordinary police services
Yeah,
for
okay.
purposes of imposing costs. Ordinarily, one squad or a squad with a sergeant acting in backup goes out, and that's typically what happens in
Okay.
almost all calls. So we're trying to get a handle on, and people that are responding to what I characterize as a routine call, because you've got one squad and maybe a squad with a sergeant that's out working the street, that they show up, that's a routine call. Every resident of Roselle has the right to have that routine police service. But when you get into a situation where you have to have 3 or 4 squad cars or you have to have mutual aid come in, that's an extraordinary circumstance that not everybody calls on.
So a
And-
normal can be 2 squad
you.
cars could be a normal thing, right?
Yeah, 2 squads could be a normal thing.
Okay.
Patrol officer and a backup. I'll let Steve address that a little bit more detail than I can, but that was what we were driving at. How do you define when it's an extraordinary service?
Mhm.
And Jim is absolutely correct. Generally on a, let's say a loud party call, it's generally a 2-car response. If there's a question, there's a supervisor that's always there. If there's a field training officer, there may be more cars just because of the training aspects, but Jim is correct. Generally on a loud party or a general nuisance, that'll tend to generate a second vehicle response. And that's out of our CAD response system.
Okay, thank you very much, guys.
Hey, Jeff, just a quick recall, what was asked to add it in there?
Wayne had asked if we should add something with notification to the neighbors, and I think the consensus of the board in the comments was that that should remain an administrative task under the zoning administrator's purview. So I would like to confirm that.
Okay, and then what I caught out of that is Karen had stated that there was discussion between the 2 members of this committee. And I thought we had discussion at our last meeting about notification being sent out to the adjoining neighbors upon request for licensing. And I think that would be fair. And the comment was made that we could also check on Airbnb for locations in Roselle. Would that only show up if they were licensed, guys? And they have to be licensed by us. Would that license automatically be Airbnb? Jeff, go ahead.
Clarification, this is not a license, this is registration.
Registration, I apologize. Okay,
And
so
from a,
would everybody be comfortable with those conditions added into this ordinance? Show of hands? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I don't understand the condition, and since I have to
Right.
write, I want to make sure I fully understand it. I apologize.
Jeff, go ahead again, please.
But I don't understand what it is. If you're saying that, you're not saying that the Airbnb has to show that they're registered and licensed in the village, are you? Or what are you, please help me with, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm sorry. The agreement is, okay, the agreement we have, we're not a license. It's not a license. It's a registration. Am I correct there, Jeff, in nomenclature?
Yes.
Okay, so when that registration takes place, the adjoining neighbors will be notified. Am I correct there, Karen?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking, if the board, if that is okay with the board to be put into this ordinance change.
Thank you, Andy.
No problem. Lee?
It sounded like the conversation earlier was people didn't necessarily want it in the ordinance, just it would be outside of the ordinance. If I'm capturing, I think. David.
So it's being done at an administrative time when the registration takes place.
That's
Yeah, I
correct.
mean, I said I was fine with it being in the ordinance. I think Wayne said he was fine, but it sounded like David, Patrick, and Bruce didn't necessarily want it.
Okay, so then what I'm leaning again, okay, because I have the majority that says they don't want it in the ordinance. What I'm leaning for, upon registration application, the adjoining neighbors will be notified.
That would suffice.
Yep.
Okay, by consensus of that, okay.
Yes, that's-
Can I ask for a recommendation then from the village board, if any other?
I make a recommendation to move forward with this
I would
ordinance.
second that.
second,
Second it.
Jim, did you have something to add? I'm sorry, did I cut you short?
No, I just want to follow through the public hearing procedures completely. So
That was my next.
comments by any other board members? Wayne gave us some extensive comments and questions, and any questions or comments from any other board members with regard to the detail. Maybe that's not necessary at this point because of Lee's motion, but I don't think that the public hearing went through all of the procedures that we typically go through under the circumstances.
Okay, I covered questions and everything and comments from the board, recommendations from the
Yeah.
board. And then I need and that was the recommendations I just asked for. I need a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Am I right or wrong, Jim? Before we make that motion, hang on.
Patty, I'm sorry, did we get a vote
No,
recommendation?
no,
No,
That's what we need to do.
All right,
I'll vote on the recommendation and then close the hearing.
all right. Can I have a vote, a roll call for the recommendation?
So the recommendation is to move forward with the text amendment as presented. And trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Berkshire.
Text amendment, what you mean at the ordinance as stated, not, there's no amendment.
Right.
That's correct.
So I'm confused. So,
The ordinance is an amendment,
okay,
an amendment to the existing code. So the
then,
text
then
amendment
yes.
changes
It's
the
what,
code,
it's
but
we
it's
what's
were
not
also
amending the
talking-
draft.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure and clarify. So then, yes.
Okay. Trustee Sarno.
Aye.
Trustee Pulaski.
Aye.
Trustee Devitt.
Aye.
And our motion is carried. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All right, can I have a roll call, Madam Clerk?
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Sarno.
Aye.
Trustee Berkshire.
Yes.
Trustee Pulaski.
Aye.
And trustee Devitt.
Aye.
And our public hearing is now closed. Okay, I have a consideration request by 3 of the businesses for a new liquor license. One of them is the Italian Pizza Kitchen, who would like to request a tea license, which is in the downtown area, which would bring video gambling to the downtown area, which the past boards and other times were not in favor of bringing it to the Main Street area. So they are allowed to request, and I would like direction from the board before we proceed to tell them to get their license of application. David, how do you feel about it?
So I know I asked Tom for some additional information this morning, and I looked at, as we've added licenses, what that's done to revenue, and it does appear thus far we haven't seen a decrease in our average monthly revenue, meaning we do see incremental revenue from each one. However, there might be a good business case for it. I am a bit wary of doing this on our main commercial corridor, just because I feel like at some point, when does the straw break the camel's back? And we've issued a whole lot, and we're up to, I think, 13 or 14, if I'm correct on that. So I'm a bit lukewarm on the idea of adding it to IPK at this time.
Okay, Mr. Domke?
Well, I gotta say that, I mean, they're not on Main Street. I don't know if that makes a difference on Irving Park Road. I know Bulldog's got it and so many other places. So I'm kind of leaning toward saying yes. Of course, I don't want it to go every which way, but how do you stop people from trying to make some money, especially during these times? So I'm somewhat in favor of it.
Okay, Barb?
I would be in favor of it. I think we need some more revenue for the village.
Lee?
I'm in favor of it. Like I said, we've granted these licenses in the past. I know we have the ability to stop them, but given that, like Wayne was just saying, Bulldog's a few blocks away and they have one, I just think it's fair to allow IPK to have one as well.
Bruce, your comment?
I think I'm in that lukewarm category. I understand Bulldogs is isolated in comparison to that main area. Then 1913, then 8,000 miles. And if I'm overruled or if it does go down that, I am very nervous about the signage because everywhere they're putting them up. I mean, even Rosario's has got them. You know, he's turned his into his little casino, got a big sign out in front. He's got slot flags flying. So I could just see that happening on Irving Park with Italian Pizza Kitchen. So I'm less likely to go forward with it, especially where their locale is in comparison to Bulldogs, which is an isolated strip mall outside of downtown. Maybe different when we expand our downtown to that area, but less likely than now.
Patrick, your feelings?
I'm against it. I was part of the original group that wanted to keep it off of Main Street. The the right decision is to continue that tradition.
So I've got a definite no, definite not really in favor of, or should I take Bruce, yours as a definite no?
I would, yeah, I would say it's, I'm less likely to be inclined to go forward with it.
Yeah. And I think at this time, since it looks like I've got the decider there, that I would like to evaluate it for a while myself. So, at this time, I would not proceed with it. Okay. My second one is for
Mr. Mayor, I have one other question regarding that before you move on, please.
ahead.
So what if maybe for the next conversation, if you're going to come back and from your evaluation, if maybe we can share with what is some of the signage considerations we want to maybe rethink or review around there. I mean, you've got nowadays with the COVID thing, people are buying giant banners. I mean, I was just down the street at Pizza Kitchen. They've got a, big banner sticking up on Roselle Road, between two signs. So it'd be interesting to see what some of those are, because if we go forward with some of these things, I can see that attracting by the flags, the signage, heck, even a banner put on their building.
If I could add to that as well, I think it'd be interesting, just because we do have the referendum in April regarding home rule. What does home rule authority afford us the ability to restrict more or less when it comes to this liquor license class specifically for video gambling? Because I know we established some policy about demarcation and trying to segment out video gambling from the rest of the storefront. I wonder if we have more leadway or less, perhaps, if we had home rule.
Well, yeah, there would be better information in home rule. We have a little more control in doing things and licensing, and there's quite a bit of detail that goes along with that, David. And to just answer Bruce's questions, I don't want to be very careful on how I say this. We do have ordinances in places for the signage. I think there's been a little bit of leniency on the signage since we've been going through the pandemic. And I think maybe it would be a good idea now to engage and do some verbal, I would say, conversations with the people along that have the flags, and let's get it under control again. So, and go from there. So at this time, I'm going to put that one on a hold for further discussion. Little Market at 225 East Irving Park Road is asking for a C-class license for them to be able to sell bottled beer and wine. It is a grocery store. We do allow that in other grocery stores and convenient markets. Need direction on the board, how they feel about it. Let's go, Patrick. Let's take you first this time.
I'm all for it. I think that would be good for both businesses.
Okay, thank you. Bruce?
I would also be for it.
Thank you. Lee?
I'm good with it.
Okay, Wayne?
Good with it.
Okay, Barb?
I agree.
And David?
I'm good with it.
That made my life easy. Thank you, guys. 6, and we can proceed with that licensing. Okay, the other one I have is for an R-class license, which is a BYO, bring your own bottle, and you can dine in with that. And that's for the Fiesta Manila or the Fiesta Asian food restaurant at 1310 West Lake Street. Before we get started in conversation, Tom, is this the same owner and facility that we continuously have to remind about food techs?
Yes, that's correct. That's a good way to put it. Yes, they are.
Okay. And this has been an ongoing situation with us, if I recollect.
Yeah, you've met with them a couple of times due to their lateness. They are up to date right now
All right.
after putting in their application. So they are current with their tax.
Okay. My strong suggestion, okay, would be to, I would like to set a 6-month dating that they be consistent in filling their obligation, and I would reconsider this at that time. I mean, that's just my strong suggestion. And again, I'd like to hear from my board on their consensus. David?
I think it's a lot easier to hold them accountable before we give them a license, so I'm on board with that approach.
Okay. Wayne?
I need to ask, what other businesses do we have that allow alcohol to be brought in? I didn't really understand that.
No other businesses have a BYO.
We did in the past, did we not, Patty?
No.
Okay.
I mean, that's just unusual, that, I don't know what that could be.
Okay. So,
So I'm kind of against this type of business.
We do have the license available, though.
license is available in our ordinances, yes.
Real quick, haven't we offered events that opportunity? Isn't it the same thing? Then
No, this is,
we never,
this is for liquor. This is an actual liquor license that allows patrons to bring their own beer or wine, and then the business can charge a corkage or glass fee.
okay.
It was initiated a year or two ago for a Thai restaurant in town, and then they never pursued it. They thought the application fee was too high, and nobody else has pursued it as well.
But I thought like the Park District or others have had events where they needed to go that route. No?
This is
Okay.
different.
Okay.
Okay, so Wayne, you said absolutely not, right?
Since we don't have any, I could see this being quite a few different organizations trying to grab this kind of zoning.
Okay.
So I'd be against even the zoning as that type.
Then it can be brought up at another meeting to amend that ordinance if is strongly felt. Okay? Barb?
I'd be against it because how do you control how much they can bring in
Okay.
of wine, beer, or whatever?
Patrick, you said no?
I would like to get some feedback from the chief on what your thoughts are. Is this hard to police or manage? What's your thoughts?
It's not that much more difficult. The differences is who do you cite in the event that you have a server issue? Now, if they're serving the alcohol, I can hold the business accountable for it or the server accountable for it. If it's a BYO, the question I always have is who do I hold responsible? And I don't know that there's an answer for it. But it's not a well-received license that I've heard of in the past.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Well, with that being said, I think that's a path that we should try to divert from. So I would not be for it.
Okay. Lee?
So just a question, if we gave it now and they didn't pay the feeding establishment tax, we could always rescind it as that's the basis to rescind it or no?
This is really a peculiar one from a legal standpoint. Giving a carrying license like that hypothetically is not controlled by the Illinois State Liquor Commission. And they take the appeals from the revocations of the licenses. So hypothetically, there would be no appeal from a revocation if the mayor's liquor commissioner decided to revoke it. On the other hand, there's a possibility that the Illinois Liquor Commission could decide that they have jurisdiction over the situation. And revocation after the Illinois Liquor Commission takes jurisdiction is extremely difficult. And you'd have to have, in my opinion, in order to achieve it, either a very serious violation or in the alternative, a series of violations over a long period of time. And
I'm
it's
more in
uncharted.
alignment. I'm more in alignment with the mayor then. I think if we give them 6 months to demonstrate that, everything's going well. I'm open to the actual license itself. It's a pretty common license that businesses in Chicago have. So, but I do think that we should hold for at least 6 months per Andy's guidance.
Bruce, I want to hear from you.
So I start with, I'm in agreement with the license itself. Like Lee, I've gone to restaurants where I've done that. And Chief, I bring it in, they have to open it. So therefore, there's a level of control of, I guess, if I bring in a 12-pack, they have to open up every bottle. And then they give me the glass and I can pour it, or they can pour it. Similarly with wine, they have to uncork it, hence the fees of the glassing and the cork fee. They're doing that. So that kind of gives some level of control, I guess, within the restaurant. But now on this particular situation, I am in agreement with you, Mayor, that let's give them 6 months to show that they can meet their obligations, and then we would be able to move forward with it.
Okay. So I guess that's what we're going to do. I've got a funny feeling that we'll be discussing another 6. So. All righty, that's all I have then from this evening. I thank everybody for their direction. Any village trustee has a report this evening? Okay, let the record show.
No, David.
I'm sorry, David.
Almost got away with it. So I know last meeting we had a public comment regarding an update on the Envision Roselle, and you had asked that I get together with Jeff to take a look at our opportunities going forward. And so what we believe to be the right course of action moving forward is in the executive summary we shared earlier this year, we outlined 5 different priorities that were intended to have working groups formed from all the taxing bodies and residents in town. Given the state of COVID and where we're at, we think it's best to maybe wait on doing a larger town hall meeting so that way we can still allow kind of seamless public interaction. And so one thing that gives us an opportunity is to start to form some working groups to kind of figure out what are some of the more robust ideas or goals we might want to execute on 5, 10, or 15-year increments. And so based on the public comment that we received, we're soliciting from the group interested parties to kind of focus on a cohesive and inclusive community. We felt that this one was one that was very relevant given a lot of the discourse that's going on in the suburbs and around the country at this time. So we felt this was an appropriate way to maybe start to trial this, refine how we work these smaller groups, and make sure that we have the right participation in order to move forward. So that's what we're currently doing at this time. And so we'll make sure to follow up with the individual who submitted that public comment at our last meeting.
Okay, thank you for the follow-up. Anybody else? Okay, village clerk.
No report.
Village administrator.
No report.
Village attorney.
No report.
Chamber of Congress liaison, Patrick.
No report.
Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to keep my comments a little bit brief. The agenda packet tonight includes the August Treasurer's Report. And I have lengthier comments, but I'm going to boil it down to we're still doing pretty well. While we're not fantastic and we're not where we were, at the same time last year, we are doing better than we've expected due to the pandemic. I'm going to jump ahead and just go over a little bit of a couple of the numbers. Sales tax was down 23%. And only 14% for the year. I think that's very good. Income tax was up 102%, but that's because the due date for filing returns was moved by the state. Local use tax is up 43%, 25% for the year. Video gaming, as we've been discussing this evening, we'll get that. We've gotten that money in September, so that'll be in your next report. Telecom tax continues to be down 14%, and eating tax was down 12%, 20% for the year. And I have to say, as I said last month, that is fantastic. Kudos again to our restaurants that are continuing to do well, at least from our perspective. I can't speak for their finances, but for what we're receiving, everything looks better than we expected. And then one last thing, as requested at the last meeting, I did put a couple pages, which is 49 to 51 of my report, is the general fund history. And then there's a column for the 2020 budget, 2020 year to date, and then 2020 projected. And I started that little exercise in March, and we were down 1.7 million at that time due to all the unknowns that we had. And since then, I update that every month and kind of adjust the assumptions. And you can see on that, the projected is down, I think it was 517,000 for the year. There are some assumptions in there that are not included, including the CARES Act funding from Cook and DuPage County or FEMA. And also it does not include some of the adjustments that were made by the departments as we looked at holding the line on some expenditures and some other things. We tried to do our best, and the personnel numbers I think are pretty close, and that's the bulk of the general fund. And so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Anybody? Okay, thank you very much, Tom, for your report. Now let's move on to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial in nature, and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no discussion on those. And if I can have our attorney give us a summary of the consent agenda, please, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight's consent agenda includes presentation or approval of the village board minutes of September 14th, 2020, the approval of the 8th partial payment for the Devlin influent pump and screening improvements in the amount of $574,612.66, the adoption of a resolution authorizing a contract with HVAC maintenance services for HVAC maintenance services with Trane in the amount of $19,760. The approval of payment for actuator replacement at the Boderman and Devlin wastewater treatment plants in the amount of $37,595, and the adoption of a resolution approving payment for electrical and SCADA upgrades at the Boderman and Devlin wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $13,300. That completes the consent agenda, Mayor.
All right, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
All right, and Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Sir, trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Devitt.
Aye.
And our consent agenda is approved. Okay, moving right along to our regular agenda under community development. David, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'll throw it over to Karen to discuss a proposed water and sewer recapture on Sycamore Avenue.
So Brock Klein is the owner of 120 Sycamore Avenue. He's the farthest south property on Sycamore in Medina that is annexed into the village. This area has sort of annexed in a piecemeal manner. All the homeowners have sort of extended the water and sewer lines as they've annexed and then wanted to connect. So Mr. Klein has run into a couple issues that have led to him requesting a recapture from the village board. The first is he has to add a fire hydrant because of the existing distance between fire hydrants. It's already too great between the two. So Public Works is requiring him to install one, which his neighbors haven't had to do. And then also a previous neighbor hadn't extended the sanitary sewer main to the farthest edge of their property like we typically require. So he now has to extend the main across two properties, his own and his neighbors, in order to connect. So the total estimate, engineer's estimate of cost for the extension of both the water and sewer is about $30,000. We have approximately 117 in the water sewer extension fund. Money in that fund can only be used for water sewer extensions. So I thought that bringing this recapture before the board would be a good idea for you guys to discuss.
Anybody? Patrick?
So being that this was kind of a surprise additional cost to him and seeing the other improvements he has to do, I have no problem with the village assisting, whether it's a portion of this from the budgeted amount that we have on the side.
Bruce, you were next.
So is he then the farthest property, or is there another one next to him that could potentially need to be annexed or request the addition?
So his house is at basically the midpoint section of Sycamore,
Okay.
Between Crest and Thorndale. So there would be, I don't foresee it coming in the next few years, but there are, I think, several properties, at least probably 10 to 15 south of him that would have to extend to connect.
So then I would agree that we should pick up this sewer definitely, because that portion should have been picked up by the other property owner to extend it to at least the end of their property. And then in doing so, we should then stipulate that he extends his to the end of his property so that we don't run into that situation again. From his property to his whole length of the property should be his cost, and then we'll pick up the stuff from the neighbor that did not do it correctly. And then as far as the fire hydrant, again, I think that benefits the whole neighborhood, and so therefore it should be something that we should help him with, so that it not just helps him but also the rest of the community.
David?
So I'm completely fine with using the recapture on this, but I had a couple of questions. As far as the neighbor that didn't fully install the extension, was that due to our negligence of not following up and enforcing that requirement, or did we allow that to kind of slip through the cracks and allow it and improve that in the past?
From my understanding, the village engineer at the time approved it.
Got it. Okay. So, I mean, I think there's, obviously we found this issue, so I have great confidence we're going to prevent it from happening again. So I think that's just something we need to keep an eye on. And then as far as the fund itself, I know we have a decent balance in it. Is there any likelihood that we might use some of this or any of it as we look at some of the issues towards the corner of Medina and Irving Park as we're discussing that extension down there? I know that's going to be covered potentially by the remediation, but is there any opportunity or cause that they might ask for funding or someone along the way, along that path, just out of curiosity?
I think it's possible, but I think from a previous, how we've done this in the past, we would require them to pay for it themselves because they're the ones requesting the additional water and sewer.
Okay, perfect. I was just concerned that as that pushes further out, that there might be other residents that might then somehow uncover other kind of incomplete projects, so to speak, that might put additional strain on the fund. So thank you for the additional information.
Okay. So then is everybody in favor of moving forward and we taking the responsibility of the recapture?
Yep.
Yes.
I think that's fair.
So clarification here, just so I'm sure I understand, because of the way recapture ordinances function, is the direction of the board to advance the funds out of the village's coffers to pay for these extensions, but then to have the village recapture those funds through a recapture ordinance, not for the owner of this property, but for itself?
Yes.
You never know that's going to happen. Is that the direction?
Yes. That's how I put it. Jeff, you had something to add,
I
please.
just want to make sure, clarification here. I heard the board talk about the village being responsible for the property at 130, the property to the north. So we would establish a public recapture. We would pay that portion of the fee, Karen, to connect to his property line to the north. And then he would be responsible for the fire hydrant and the connection for his property. Am I correct?
From my purposes, the way I was stating it is partially, Jeff. We would pick up from that property that didn't go all the way to the end of their property. So we would bring the sewer to the start of his property on our cost. He would then take it from there. On the fire hydrant, we would put that in as a means to protecting the community, not on him to go ahead and have to pay for that fire hydrant. That was my proposal.
So that's a little bit different than what Karen had in her memo, correct? So that's what I just wanted to clarify with the board.
I
I'm
would
fine
agree
with
with Bruce. I would agree with Bruce. I just wanted to ask you, what's the maximum distance between fire hydrants?
It
300
is,
feet? said
300
30
feet. I put 30 feet. It's
Okay,
30
that
feet.
messed me up for about half a day today. I went looking outside in my neighborhood. I can't find one within 30 feet.
Sorry about that.
I know, I'm sorry.
So just one point of clarification, because I thought originally when we were talking about the fire hydrant, we were talking about it being a portion of it we would be reimbursing, not the entire installation costs. And I guess that's where I have a difference of opinion maybe on there. Like, I don't think we should pick up the entire fire hydrant cost, but we should pick up a fair share of it. So I don't know whether you do some calculation based off the number of properties that would benefit from it and give, you know, a proportional share to the property owner for his costs, and then we would pick up the rest. It would still be the majority of the cost, but I think my intent was not to pick up the full $17,775 for the fire hydrant.
And I would align with that, David, then. Thank
Okay.
you.
Just to clarify, the fire hydrant is only $4,000. 17,775 is for the entire water main extension.
Thank you.
Okay. and
So David, would that change your position? Because that's why I was like, for the fire hydrant, putting that in, that's fine. Bringing that extra sewer piece to get to that other property because that other one, that everything else for water and sewer for that property is theirs.
So I know it seems maybe a bit silly, but I feel like a lot of people benefit from the fire hydrant. And so if we were to have a new subdivision go in, that cost factor gets kind of included as they're building out that area. So in my mind, even if it might be, I'm not going to fall on this as my as my end all be all, but I still think having some share of that being owned is responsible and appropriate, just so that way we're not picking up fire hydrants down the road for every single time this happens.
So
Patrick?
shouldn't that fire, oh, I'm sorry.
Patrick, you were up next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to be clear, looking at the memo here, I want to make sure that I understand. When the pre-annexation or the annexation agreement was taken care of, there was a set amount of cost that the owner was made aware of. According to what I'm reading here, and correct me if I'm wrong, the additional cost that he's coming up with right now is $17,775, which is for whatever that was not in the original costs associated with annexation. Is that the right figure?
No, so the 17,775 is the total cost to extend the water main 100 feet to his property.
Okay.
He didn't know about the fire hydrant issue. He didn't know about the additional valve that we required him to install.
Okay.
And then the sanitary aspect of it is typically, Mr. Klein would have only had to extend the sewer main 100 feet. But because we allowed his neighbor to the north to just connect the existing line and didn't extend it, he now has to extend it 200 feet.
Okay, so what I like to propose is any additional costs that this homeowner has incurred after the fact of his original estimate would be something that we would be, or that I would be willing to cost the front.
Concurrent cost.
Yes. So I don't know if we have an exact figure on that, but I think that's fair. He came into it knowing a certain figure and now he's expected to know another figure. I think that we assist him with covering that cost, whatever it might be.
So if I can, Patrick, that adds confusion to me. I mean, it seems to be pretty cut and dry. Previous neighbor did not extend the sanitary and sewer. So we should incur the pickup from the sanitary sewer from where it stops to Mr. Klein's property. That's cut and dry. Whatever the cost is, we pick up that portion of the work. Then Mr. Klein picks up the sewer from the edge of his property to the edge of his property. That's our typical agreement.
Right.
And then that's the sewer side. Then from the water perspective, the water is what I'm hearing is he needs to bring that full cost in, the full water. And then the piece that he was not expecting was the addition of the fire hydrant and the valve to support that fire hydrant. And those are the ones where I'm saying we pick up all of it. I understand David's position, and I can go either way, where David says he should pick up a portion of that because it will benefit him both on an insurance and the neighboring community area. So we would probably pick up the lion's share, and what I've heard Karen say, that's around $4,000. But we're saying that Mr. Klein would benefit from having that fire hydrant. He just shouldn't have to pay for all of it.
Right. So bottom line is, if the agreement was when he signed the annexation was that his cost was going to be 1,000, I think we should hold him to the 1,000. Now he's accruing whatever it might be, 2,000. Then I don't think it's right for him to pay that extra 1,000. Knowing those aren't real figures, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah,
whatever the annex came up with, I think that's fair.
Mr. Donkey, you had something you wanted to say.
My confusion is, where would that fire hydrant be if we did the job right? Would it be on his property, or would it be on the guy's property next door to him?
It would be farther north.
So he wouldn't have it in front of his house if it would have been done right in the first place.
No.
Correct.
So why should he pay for the fire hydrant?
I'm simply saying, and I think David and I are kind of in the same boat. We're paying for the majority of it, but yet it's still a benefit because it's still a proximity to his property, a closer proximity than, say, another fire hydrant.
Okay, and then I would just like to say, for clarification, we are not paying for it, we're holding recapture on it.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
All right,
But
so we are holding the recapture on it for further development on the property owners at that time will pay the cost of the installation of those mains and fire hydrants.
Right, which is in my mind, like, I don't think, again, the property owner should pay for the whole thing. Thank you for finding this shortcoming on our end, but we're gonna recapture the cost of that from other property owners. Then they would not be paying anything towards that fire hydrant. So all their neighbors, once they annex in, would pay for that fire hydrant. He would not. So that's why I'm just saying, proportionally, let's figure out what it is due for, like we would charge any of the other neighbors. Like it would be for a new subdivision or for anyone else in the future. Instead of covering all the costs up front and not allowing them to have any cost for it, they should have some cost for it. I'm not trying to burden them by any means, but I think we need to look at that equitably and trying to make sure that we clean it up.
Karen and Jeff, do you feel you have a correct handle on what the intent of the board is?
Yep, we will work with Attorney Knippen to draft up the recapture ordinance. But it is important to note that we will front the money, and then the property owner, Mr. Klein, will have to pay his fair share upon the recapture too.
Yes.
Is that correct, Karen?
I think so. So we're only doing a recapture for part of the costs? Or are we just, I'm just a little bit confused because typically the recapture is for all of the costs and we divide it amongst the three.
We're gonna do a recapture ordinance that reflects the entire cost. Mr. Klein is gonna pay his portion of which the board identified. And then we will create the recapture for future property owners that want to connect.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We need any other direction there? We're all good. Okay, let's move on to administration.
Okay,
Barb.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Receive an update from staff on the status of obtaining financial assistance through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, and I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Trustee Sarno. Yeah, just briefly, I wanted to piggyback on where Tom left off in his last report of the treasurer's report. I think as a staff, we're starting our budget review for fiscal year 2021. And I think where our numbers are landing for where this year is going, certainly they're much better off than our earlier projections. That said, we've got an opportunity through state and federal assistance to recoup some of our expenses. And I think Tom and Jason have been actively working with DuPage County on the CARES Act reimbursement. And Jason's memo includes 3 opportunities for us to use CARES Act funding to do some things in our public facilities that were not budgeted and now are eligible for those expenses. So long story short is I think we've got a good opportunity here to take advantage of this CARES Act funding to purchase some of these things that weren't budgeted for. And as a side note too, while Tom's estimate at the end of this year is that we've kind of looked at that shortfall being about $500,000. It doesn't include some of the things the board had already approved, and that was for a reduction in almost $300,000 in operational expenses. We also got a rebate from the DUCOM for a quarterly of about $125,000. We had a rebate for half of our membership dues for DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. So all of those, along with that CARES reimbursement, knock on wood, we're going to be in a little bit better position than we thought. And that's why I would encourage you to consider what Jason and Tom are recommending. So Jason, go ahead.
Thanks, Jeff. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So there's 3 projects here for the board to consider. 2 of the 3, I would say the board was previously made aware of. The third one I could talk through a little more relative to the furniture improvements at Village Hall. But the first one is bringing back to the board is the proposal for the council chambers. I previously had a proposal that was, I think it was closer to $49,000. So this one reflects a $15,000 decrease in price after working with the vendor to back out a couple things that staff had asked to be in there. So this shouldn't be anything new to the board. It would allow the audio visual recording of meetings in the council chambers. It would allow for public participation remotely. It would allow some or all trustees to be in the council chambers. It could also allow village board members to also participate remotely or a combination thereof, where right now the board, we can only have all remote meetings or all in-person meetings. We can't accommodate through our technology the ability for what I would consider a hybrid meeting. So this would allow the board to be able to reconsider having in-person meetings. And I think if you're thinking about public hearings or some other type of meetings, P&Z, ZBA, this is the necessary technology to be able to start to reconsider in-person meetings while also preserving the ability for people to participate remotely during the pandemic. I don't know if you want me to go through all 3, Mayor, or go through one at a time.
If you want to give us a highlight on all 3 of them, go ahead.
Sure. The second proposal is for the furnishing installation of new workstations at Village Hall in the Finance and Community Development Department. Attached to the memo was kind of the schematics of it. As you see, it provides enhanced separation for employees compared to the current work arrangement, provides physical barriers relative to COVID and the spread. So it has some plexiglass separators between the workstations. It also has employees kind of come in and out of their workstations further apart or in opposite directions, unlike the current arrangement where they're coming in right at each other. So this is for replacing the 4 existing workstations in finance with these new ones. Also for community development, it replaces the current one used by our permit coordinator, and it also includes an additional one, as we've spoken with the board previously about adding on some additional support staff that would work in that department. And currently there isn't really a workstation that could accommodate that person. So that's why you see 2 there in community development. Affordable Office Interiors is based here in Roselle, and they would do all of the work for that project. And finally, the third one is scanning of various public works and community development documents into a digital format. We knew pre-pandemic we had some improvements to do relative to scanning and getting more records in digital format that solely reside in paper in files. Now with the pandemic, it pointed out that's kind of a deficiency in our operations and the ability to continue to work remotely. So you have before you, I think I counted it, it's nearly an estimated 400,000 pieces of paper being scanned into a digital format, utilizing our incumbent company who does that for us for both the clerk's office as well as finance. This is solely an estimate. I think it's a conservative estimate that it's probably should come in less than this. But so we'll actually be charged for the total, down to the exact number of records scanned. But so for the board, you kind of just have that estimate based on one of their company's representatives walking through our building and looking at file sizes and kind of doing their best to estimate that for us. So that's $54,000 that would, for the most part, put all of our key records in digital format, especially those records that are often called upon by multiple departments. So it would reduce the necessity for employees to travel to different buildings. It would also support them to not only work remotely from home, but also to work in the field and having access to digital records in the field as well. And we're working through the piece that would allow the public to potentially have greater access to some of these documents as well, reducing their need to come into Village Hall to obtain any of these kind of records.
Bruce?
So on the first one, how long is that timeline for that work to be completed?
I asked him if he could get it done this year and he said yes. If that's the best of estimate I can give.
It's not good enough for me. And here's the reason why. We are in the public sector right now. This particular hybrid model is a great controversy at workplaces and how much and what's going to happen. And tools and things in place, the new normal is not going to be what we have here. I would like to see some sort of process and procedure in play and what the rules and regulations we're going to have. I mean, does that mean that I don't have to ever come to a meeting other than remote going forward?
Well, for right now, as long under the current Open Meetings Act, as long as the governor or IDPH have a state of emergency in place and
Correct. Well, what's the new normal after that, Jason? That's the point. No one knows.
I think what won't change is, and Jim can correct me, the public could participate in meetings remotely. That has nothing to do about the Open Meetings Act, to the best of my knowledge.
Agree with that.
So my point being is there's still a lot of unknowns. I would like to see some level of some procedure or process before I would be behind it. The other two, I'm 100% behind. But until I have some better clarity of what we're going to do and what our regulations are going to be, I'm just not for that. I mean, I want that understanding. So.
I have a question too on the first one. And I asked this, I think last time, I just didn't see it in the packet, unless I missed it, but I wanted to understand. So the first time we do this, it's $34,771 and that's reimbursable. Number one, like how much of that is sort of permanent infrastructure versus things that we need to buy on a consistent basis? And what's the purchase cycle for some of these larger ticket items? And how much would they be on a 3-year basis, 5-year basis, whatever it is?
I asked the vendor, and 8 years, kind of like most technology, is kind of the estimated refresh window for this equipment. None of this is what I would say consumable in the sense that it would need to be regularly replaced. It's all AV wires, video cameras. Really, I think over half the cost are the pan, tilt, zoom cameras. Otherwise, it's just, some of this stuff wouldn't have to be replaced in 8 years either when you're dealing with wires and and stuff like that. It's really would be the cameras. If like TVs, you know, things get crisper, they need to
Right.
be refreshed. So it's really the cameras, maybe probably the signal processor, because that certainly processors get faster, better quality. So those are the main components of the overall cost. And then obviously the labor of the 34, I apologize, isn't broken down, but that's a good chunk. Of the proposal, I apologize, I didn't include the breakdown between labor and hardware, but it's 8 years for hardware, and don't envision anything needing to be replaced more frequently than that.
Back to you, Bruce.
I actually have one more follow-up question to that.
Sure.
The other thing I would be interested in potentially seeing too is maybe is there the ability to get plexiglass dividers between board members on the dais as part of this CARES Act as well?
We've received reimbursement for that, and those are items that certainly are eligible for CARES, is those types of physical barriers between you know, workers, elected officials. But yeah, that would be eligible.
Yeah, so I'd like to see something on that as well.
Okay, Bruce.
So everything that Lee has mentioned is just emphasize in my mind the need for more of an understanding of the process and procedures, because just because there's plexiglass between us, I would still not be comfortable in sitting next to a potential employee, a potential participant in the audience, etc. Secondly, just as we have the TVs don't work when you plug them in, those are brand new. The microphones don't sometimes go out. All of those things, I want to know then what is the process, and what do we do when folks that are expecting for us to be online and aren't because of this? What do we do? How do we react? What are, you know, is there emergency protocol? Am I going to get a text to go into Zoom because my email's not working? All of those things need to be accounted for before we put in tools. And process has to follow tools.
David.
So for the village employee furniture, I'm good with that. I'm also good with the scanning. I'm also in favor of the video system. I think I don't want to go down the physical barrier route, because then how do you protect the public in their seating area? And I think that just opens up a whole lot of things we'd have to jump down. I think though we were thrusted in this situation with very little preparation, and we've been able to adapt to Zoom, and we didn't have time to establish procedures, and we didn't have the opportunity or the luxury to build out every scenario in which we can definitely operate within, but we adapted. And I think this is one situation that gives us more tools at our disposal to utilize. I don't disagree. I think we need to establish a board policy. Right now we're operating under a emergency order and declaration. That's what gives us the ability to break our policy, but we do have a policy regarding how we attend meetings and how we can participate. And it's upon us as board members to then revise and amend those. But I'm not able to amend rules if I don't have tools at my disposal. And I think I have the confidence that we can learn how to operate this equipment. And like anything else, just like this Zoom meeting could crash, the cameras could crash. There's all sorts of different things that can happen. And I think we have an opportunity to get these expenses reimbursed and allow greater public access and participation to us going forward. I think of public hearings where we've hit capacity and we've had to move to alternate locations, or other opportunities where this would have been really great technology to be able to employ and use. So I think this is a step in the right direction, and we have some time, it sounds like, between installation and use to actually refine and build out more robust policies. So definitely respect and understand the concerns raised, but I think it's something that I would like to see us move forward with, and we can continue to have a conversation about the policies set in place, since the CARES Act reimbursement deadline does exist. So.
Lee?
The only comment I would make regarding Trustee Pulaski's comment regarding the physical barriers, the difference is that there's a fixed width on the dais versus the public. I could space those chairs and tell people not to sit in every other chair, every third chair, versus the dais, which is whatever it is, 50 feet wide. There's only so much space there that we can't physically distance, which is why I was talking about the dividers.
So, Mr. Mayor, one last question. Since we're going to be voting on this, how do we vote, or and maybe Jim, you can give us guidance. I mean, it seems like a lot of us are in favor for the last two, and definitely there's a disagreement in terms of what should happen in terms of you can know what tools you are available to you to divide the process and procedures before you actually have to put them in place, and then you don't put those in place because they're there. So how do we vote? Do we go in and exclude one? Do we, when we say yay or nay, some guidance,
So any
please?
any vote you're doing now, based upon the way that this is in the agenda, is simply an advisory vote. The
Okay.
advisory vote then would probably proceed to where the staff would present resolutions approving contracts consistent with possibly all three. If it appears that one would absolutely fail at this point, possibly just two. And then those would be brought forward in resolution. You'd have the same legislative authority to either vote those up or vote those down when they come through and the detail of the contract is attached to the resolution.
Mr. Domke, you had something you wanted to add?
Just real quick, I thought we talked about what would happen if this technology failed once before. And Jim, didn't you say something like, well, then the meeting could be rescheduled at another date or something? I mean, the protocol for all this that Bruce brought up is very valid. We should certainly have all this set up because it looks like we're going to be doing this type of meetings for a long time.
But
Yeah,
we're under the emergency, right? We're under the
correct.
emergency piece, not a business as usual situation that this is intended to work.
So in any event, with regard to the failure of the technology during the meetings, the answer is not entirely clear because let me give you an example. Let's assume the video fails, but the audio remains active. Does that invalidate the whole meeting and you need to continue it? Let's assume that there's no exhibits that are being offered at the meeting. You might be able to continue an oral meeting only at that point that would have legal validity. On the other hand, if both systems failed, then it seems to me that the most prudent course would be to continue all agenda items that have not been addressed to a future meeting to be addressed. That's particularly true, based on the fact that we have conditions now that say roll call votes have to be taken on everything. Implies the public is entitled to know, how people are voting on those things when they occur. So I think that, as you look at the technology and consider the failure parameters, you're almost going to have to look at it on the question of what is failing and what is on the agenda and what's the most prudent way to get to the point that the public's interests are protected in being able to provide transparency in the operation of government. So I wish I could give you a black and white answer to that, but I can't because unfortunately, with the way this pandemic's operating and with the way our technology is operating, I mean, the first day they went back on Zoom and they opened the schools to Zoom, it crashed. So we really don't know at this point we know that there can be failures. That's obvious. We don't know what the impact of the failure is legally because we don't have the details as to how the failures occur and what the effect is on the agenda that it may exist at that time. If you got through a whole meeting, for example, and the technology failed before the motion to adjourn, what I would propose is go into the motion, adjourn the meeting, and then reflect that in the minutes of the meeting that would be approved at the next meeting, because a motion to adjourn really isn't what I'd characterize as the end-all be-all of substantive legislative action of the village board. If it occurs in the first two items of the meeting, you've got a different analysis going on at that point.
Okay. So give me a synopsis here on what we want to do. I hear everybody's in favor of the, except for one. Am I correct?
I mean, I wouldn't even say I'm necessarily not in favor of one. I'm just saying that I wanted to understand the cycle. So 8 years, I mean, if we could get 8 years of AV upgrades, even let's say in 8 years, we don't want to redo them and just be done with it. I think it's fine to do, but I just wanted to understand how much of that cost is going to be recurring. And it sounds like, Jason, it sounded like you're saying about half of it.
Recurring as far as what would be,
Well, I'm
What do you
saying
mean
like
by return?
in today's dollars, will we have to pay 35,000 every 8 years to redo everything basically? Or is like 14,000 of that basically running wires, et cetera, that we're never gonna really have to replace, or
Yeah,
let's say
right.
replace every 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specifically. Obviously, some of the labor would still be there, not all of it, because some of what's being installed is going to be more or less permanent. So I'd have to go back and come back to the board with a little more clarity around some of those questions for you, Lee.
But that's why I'm saying I'm comfortable saying, yeah, I still want to understand what that is. Because if we're saying that the estimated life cycle for the first time around is 8 years, I think it makes sense that we're getting reimbursed from the county to spend the 34,000. Then we could essentially see it as basically an 8-year experiment, right? Where we have the audio visual. And at the end of that 8 years, if we say, hey, this wasn't really worth doing again, then you just don't pay for the upgrades and you just call it a day. Or you say, yeah, it definitely helped out a lot. To David's point, you can have expanded access to things like ComEd, where people could go, instead of going to Lake Park, they just go online. And then we say, yeah, it actually made a lot of sense and this is a good investment. And like I said, in today's dollars, maybe it's 25,000 and we just go ahead with it.
I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'm hesitant till I get some better understanding of how we're going to use it and manage it. Not only that, but Lee brings up a good point. We haven't talked about support and maintenance. Is our IT group going to have to support and maintain this, and what's the annual cost that we're going to have to do? The 8 years is for this equipment, but who's going to continually ensure that it's operational and running before a meeting? Who's going to do the upgrades and the like to any of this stuff? None of that is reflected in this one-time cost. And so I'd like to see what that annual cost is going to be, along with understanding the ways in which we're going to use and operate it. Then I'd be fine with it. Right now, it's just, here's a dollar amount and hurry up and spend it because we might get it. And it's not concluded that we're getting it. We pay for it and then we ask for it. So let's not put that cart in front of the horse.
Go ahead, Wayne.
How much time do we have before we can't get this money? What's our due date for making a decision?
And the current deadline for projects to be completed, more or less, is December 31st. I'm confident I can provide you answers in 2 weeks and or provide you additional information, and including a little more input from the vendor. And I think, and I'll confirm with the vendor, but I envision it's a 6 to 8 week maybe process for the vendor to install it, install.
As long as we have time, I'd like to get to what Bruce was saying. I'd like to get more details on the cost, fixed and variable.
Go ahead, David.
And just a point of clarification, I thought all three of these were preliminarily passed for the county and they've given a initial blessing on them all, which we should feel confident in, correct? It's just a matter of us actually going through the steps at this point. So I have no problem. I agree. Like we're just asking to put these on the next agenda from my understanding. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. I think we should do is put each one of these as a separate item, or maybe we put B and C on the consent and we put A on the agenda for discussion so we can discuss these additional points. But I feel I'm acting under the assumption the county has approved these. We now need to go and do our due diligence and say yes or no.
Okay, then let's send Jason off to get gather the information that's been requested, and then bring it back at a later date.
Well, Andy?
Yes, Jeff.
Part of the direction is we would use the October 12th meeting to prepare resolutions to approve contracts. And to David's point, if the board was consensus that the B and C everybody wanted to do, we would put them on consent. Right. But the other item we'll put on the regular portion of the agenda for further discussion and review.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then moving along.
Thank you.
Trustee Sarno.
Okay. Provide direction to staff regarding recommended changes to the daily fee and permit parking commuter lots at the train station. Hand it over to Jason.
Thank you. Staff has been having some conversations with Metra, as well as kind of internal conversations around the impact that the Metro 19 development would have on the parking lot up there. and the board themselves have dealt with permit parking and needing to handle refunds and kind of the operational logistical challenges that posed. So staff's outlined a number of recommendations relative to parking at the lot. I think that one certain driving factor is the anticipation that the existing daily fee lot there resides under the footprint of Metro 19 project. And if that project proceeds and receives approval by the end of this year, you could start to see construction fencing put up, items like that, that would take that parking lot offline. So to be a little proactive, particularly because of weather and the need to relocate those numbered spaces somewhere, staff's kind of has a pretty comprehensive recommendation, and obviously the impact on commuter behavior has been very dramatic, as Metro has noted and as we've seen in our own revenue. So the recommendations outlined for the board, and I apologize, my web browser is not working, so I can't pull up my full agenda item in front of me, but it's related to unrestricted parking, and Metro has seen a growing pre-pandemic, but obviously post-pandemic, they envision the same thing, unrestricted parking where daily fee permit parking are commingled. Right now, we have restricted parking. Certain areas of the lots are restricted for daily fee or permit parkers, and you can't commingle. You'll get a ticket if you do. So that's one. Number two is park by license plate versus parking by numbered space or permit placard. With technology, park by license plate is sort of the prevailing preference, as it's easier to enforce through technology, particularly license plate reading technology. Along with leveraging technology for enforcement, it's also with the technology, it provides greater options to commuters, be it paying through a mobile app like you can pay through now. You can also start to now purchase in some of these applications permits digitally instead of now where there are placards hanging from rear view mirrors. You can go online and order it, but finance is still processing it behind the scenes and is sending you a paper permit. While I don't know offhand of too much counterfeiting of permits, it's certainly easier to counterfeit that little placard than it would be to register by license plate. So with all of this, staff is recommending a few things effective 1/1/2021 and a couple things leading up to that for that transition. That is at a minimum, right now I'm recommending we not sell any permits 1/1/21. I think you were provided with the stats of how many people have purchased permits, and we're in that maybe 20 to 30 number, which kind of lines up with the number of daily commuters that are parking at Roselle is about between 20 and 40 commuters a day versus the pre-pandemic of over 1,000. It's a robust program to manage for just 30 people. So putting that to daily fee, if the board's not open to eliminating all permits, certainly would highly recommend not selling annual permits effective 1/1/21. Not sure how many people will want to buy it, but also don't think we want to put ourselves in a position again of processing 200, almost 200 refunds. So consolidating all that parking to daily fee, renumbering some existing permit spaces to daily fee is laid out in that exhibit. It gives us more daily fee parking than we have now. We feel it will get us through the winter by using just simple paint on the ground, which would need to probably be done by the end of October. Metro is good with that. The south permit lot will become Metro's property if and when a land exchange agreement is adopted. So that will become their property, and they're fine with converting it to daily fee. The unrestricted parking then in this environment would really just be daily fee. We wouldn't be commingling permit and daily fee until the future. I think really using 2021 to evaluate commuter parking behavior, adoption to technology, allowing the village to put in place a license plate reader system. Certainly, we feel that'll be crucial when that parking garage for Metro 19, if and when that comes online. We will need some kind of technology, I feel, to better enforce within that structure. The park by license plate, I think that can be rolled out in the future. I think effective 1/1/21, you could park by number, a daily fee, and then also changing our our electronic parking application is currently called Park Mobile. A competitor to them is Passport. They're the ones who host Park Chicago. So if you've ever parked in the city, you already have that app. And they provide a wallet feature, which should save the village credit card fees. So we pay at least pre-pandemic $1,000+ a month in credit card fees for paying by credit card, either in the machine or online through the app. This, much like a Starbucks card, this has a wallet where you could just do one $50 transaction that we would pay the credit card fees on, and then that would be put in your Passport wallet, and then you would draw down on that as a commuter. So those transactions, those individual transactions, daily parking would not create additional credit card fees. And Passport and Park Mobile, both, if you pay through their app or over the phone through them, do have a convenience fee of 35 cents, which people are currently paying now through Park Mobile, and that fee doesn't change for Passport. So there's a lot thrown out to the board. And the final piece is to support park by license plate, but also because of the age of our machines, we're approaching that need to upgrade them. They're about 5 or 6 years old now, and upgrading the machines would be about $8,000, which would support park by license plate technology. It'd be a color screen, and it would also support buying permits at the machine. If and when those come back, you could technically enter your license plate, buy a permit, and would be entered into the parking management system that our CSOs and those would draw upon for enforcement purposes. The paint cost is about under $6,000 is what we envision that would be. And then using the budget year 2021 to really dive deeper into LPR, the license plate reader, to see what that technology is, particularly if we're preparing for a parking structure at that time, then it'll be very crucial to take a deeper dive into that. So those are the summary of the recommendations relative to changes to the commuter parking lot.
Let's go first. Go ahead, Bruce. You're on mute, Bruce. You're muted, Bruce.
Sorry about that. So I like the idea. I think everything's good there. Just curious, what if you have multiple cars? I mean, are you able to register multiple license plates? How does that work?
Yeah, that would have, well, currently, if you have a placard, you can share it, right? If you're taking another car, it is an option to allow more than one license plate to be registered for a digital permit. That would be a policy decision of the village board to decide at that time.
Or like a rental car, you know, my car's in the shop and I've got it for a week. I mean, is there ways to do that kind of stuff? I mean, those are things that you.
Yeah, the technology, I think it comes down to what we would allow. I know we demoed some of the technology earlier this year or maybe last year now, and they spoke about a couple of those different things. It's so it seems like the flexibility and the technology would support it. But the car rental and that would certainly be something unique that we'd have to follow up on.
Okay.
Anybody else? David?
I'm in favor of it. I guess one thing that we don't need to tackle right away, but with us reconfiguring things, I think it'd be nice to look at signage and anything we might want to do. I know there's a lot of work that would be going on into early next year, but I think it might be a good opportunity just to see where there might be opportunities to make it a little bit clearer in addition to all these changes that we're going to be making to the parking structure.
Lee?
I don't mind the commingling part of it. I would like to get to the point where we did have like just a digital license plate reader, and to Bruce's point, the ability to register multiple cars under one permit, and the camera could obviously capture if, you know, more than one person's household, more than one car from one household is in the lot at a time. I don't know that I necessarily support getting totally rid of permits for next year. I think a lot of it is kind of up in the air right now. I mean, a lot of companies are talking about going back at the new year. I would be in favor of potentially doing sort of a hybrid where we say, hey, the only permit we're going to offer maybe is an annual, and there's no refunds if you decide to purchase an annual, or kind of see what the sort of appetite for that is, or only do quarterly, whatever it is. But I do think we should have a permit option. I mean, if we start charging the amounts that are here, pay by phone, pay at machine, it's a significant cost increase versus this year. So I do think we should have a bridge where there is a permit option next year as well.
Anybody else? Okay, Jason, I do hear direction there for you. I personally like the license plate reader. I think it'd make everybody's life a lot easier, a lot faster. What it will cut down on, less errors. I think there's a couple questions asked in technology there, if that can be proceeded. I do, for lease purposes, for permits, I would probably do quarterly without a refund. So at least that's announced right out there in advance. And those are just a couple of my ideas of where I want, but I think the technology aspect of it, of us going to a plate reader, would make life a lot easier all the way around. And like you said, our equipment is almost due for an update. And I think the numbers fall in place. So does that give you enough direction? Everybody else agree with me or not?
Yes.
I'm aligned.
Everybody in a line? Okay.
Yes.
Thank
There
you.
we go. Okay, moving right along.
Okay. Consider a staff recommendation to amend Article 3 Municipal Waste Disposal, Section 8-63, System Type, Licensing or Franchise System of Chapter 8, Health and Sanitation of the Code of Ordinances of the Village of Roselle. Hand it over to Brian.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So what you have in front of you is just a memo that summarizes staff's recommendation to amend the village's municipal waste disposal ordinance. Simply put, it would add a new paragraph that requires all businesses and residents to abide or participate in the municipal waste program that we have. Currently, our contract stipulates that it is an exclusive franchise agreement that incorporates all properties within the corporate limits of the village. However, our ordinance is kind of lacking on the enforcement piece that's necessary for those one-offs that we've seen during the transition with Flood Brothers, for certain businesses or residents that have used a different hauler within the village that have not been either notified to staff or otherwise. It would give us the ability to enforce our ordinance and our contract and honor the agreement with Flood. We do get reports on a monthly basis that kind of show those residents within the village that have on their own opted out of service or refused to pay and to go to another hauler. And currently all that we would be able to do is go after the hauler if we knew who it was for not having a permit within the village. So this is a simple add-on to our current ordinance. And if the board is in concurrence with staff's recommendation, we would bring that amendment back on the 12th.
Patrick?
So I like this. I think this is much needed. I've heard that several people around the village don't have our waste hauler and do it by other means. So I think this is a necessary ordinance. My question, however, is what is the penalty, or what kind of fines or whatnot will we be able to do for those that don't abide by this ordinance? Maybe that's more of a question for you, Jim.
Yeah, it's the standard penalty that we have under our general penalty ordinance.
Okay.
Okay. Is everybody in favor of?
Yes.
Wayne?
Yeah.
I gotta say that I was kind of shocked when I saw this, because when we went through the negotiation with Flood Brothers, we thought we were representing the entire village, whether it be business or residents. And it's just shocking that I didn't know there was some anomalies in this system. So I just wanted to share that. I agree that we should that contract is precious, and everyone should be able to comply with it.
And there are those that opt out and want to do different things with their garbage, and that's placing it in other people's containers. So I think this will eliminate some of the business fly-by dumpings and other things like that. So I'm all in favor of
Amen.
adding.
Amen.
Yep.
Everybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, that'll be brought back as an ordinance then, right? Change?
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, anything else?
No.
Sarno?
Nothing else.
All righty, let's move right along to fire. Mr. Devitt, we have nothing for you. Under police, Mr. Domke, we have nothing for you. Public Works, Mr. Brookshire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute change order number 4 for the Devlin wastewater treatment plant influent pump and screening project between the Village of Roselle and William Brothers Construction, Inc. The deductive amount of $8,754.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please, a roll call.
Trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
and trustee Domke.
Aye.
And our motion is carried.
Okay, moving along, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute change order number 1 for the 2020 storm sewer improvement project between the Village of Roselle and Morrow Construction, Inc. in the additive amount of $47,188.50.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would like to say one thing, Mr. Mayor.
Please, Mr. Domke, go ahead.
Noticing how they negotiated with East Pine Avenue residents, I thought that was very good of our staff to do that and make some modifications based on that. So kudos to you guys for paying attention to the residents.
Anybody else? Madam Clerk, if you would, please.
Trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Domke.
Aye.
And our motion is carried.
And I'd like
Aye.
to make a motion.
Me too.
Oh,
Wait a
That's
minute,
all right.
I was used to going last, okay?
okay.
That's all right. It's not the first.
So then I'll continue to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a master license agreement between the Village of Roselle and Everstream GLC Holding Company, LLC.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk?
Trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
Sarno.
Aye.
Okay, is there anything else, Mr. Brookshire?
Nothing more, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, moving down to finance, Mr. Trejo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable list for September 28th, 2020 in the amount of $1,475,885.15.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on our bills list? Madam Clerk, if you would be so kind for a roll call.
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Poleski.
Aye.
And our motion is carried. Is there anything else, Mr. Trejo?
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have no executive session this evening. Other business for our discussion, please. Patrick?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, out this weekend, ran into a bunch of residents that came up with a common theme. Just was hoping that we could update on any developments with the I-390 Roselle land development we own there.
Jeff, you or I, go ahead.
Sure. I think since the pandemic started in mid-March, trustee Devitt, there's been little or no action on the property at I-390 and Roselle Road, both either by developers or the village. as you all know, the village has been focusing on our existing businesses and making sure that they've had all their resources necessary to get through the pandemic. But also have Jairus, the Metro 19 potential project on East Irving Park Road. So most of our efforts have been related to those two. Obviously, our community development department is going through some transition, and we as a staff plan on coming back to the board with some ideas on these larger economic development issues involving properties like that in the future.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Anything else? Can I kindly ask for a motion to adjourn?
So move.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, have a good evening.